welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And I want to thank you so much for taking your time out this evening to tune into the show and join in this very important conversation. We definitely want you to participate. You know, we believe in audience participation here. I'm calling tonight's discussion Education, What the Florida? What the Florida is going on? Okay, listen, when Governor DeSantis, also known as DeSatan on this channel, uh, said and did the changes of the instruction format and standards for the advanced placement African American studies classes in Florida, we all were kind of watching him with the side eye, like, what are you doing? How are you, an educator, going to tell the educators and the people who make these standardized tests what it is that they should be teaching? Okay, so then it only got worse because now they've just passed legislation um, that students are to be taught that enslaved people managed to receive a benefit by being enslaved. In other words, oh, it wasn't so bad. Slavery did have some merits, didn't you know? Slavery, that's like saying before the Jewish people who were in concentration camps, before they were marched off to gas chambers, it's like saying to them, oh, it wasn't so bad. They got some benefit of being in the concentration camp before the ultimate happened to them. So don't cry about it so much. Who in their right mind would say something so inhumane and as disgusting as that? Okay, so now we must not tolerate this. Absolutely not. My guests and I will discuss, and I want you to chime in. And of course, as always, what the Florida? All right, my first guest is new to the show. And since he's a solo male on the show, I'm bringing him up first. It's
Don't do that to me, Pam.
Yes, Michael Dublin Jr. He's a native of North Carolina. He's been raised in Raleigh. He's currently a resident of Garner, North Carolina. He is a proud graduate of North Carolina State University and has been a public school teacher for the past 2 decades. Michael is a member and a potential candidate for the North Carolina Green Party. Welcome, Michael, to the show. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you, Pam. I'm honored for the invitation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, next up is another new guest to the show, and it is Shauna Breeley of Georgia. And she is a recent retiree with the U.S. Department of Defense as a cybersecurity officer with over 30 years of experience in IT. She's a graduate of Troy University. She's won several awards for her work in technical documentation, and she is a U.S. Army veteran. Shauna is currently developing a program to teach cybersecurity skills to homeless minorities. Welcome, Shauna, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And last and certainly not least is our birthday girl, Jonda Scott Adams. Happy birthday, Jonda.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, she's spending part of her birthday with us. How about that? Jonda is a native of Trenton, New Jersey, a graduate of Rutgers University, and she received her law degree from George Washington University. Jonda's been practicing law for over 20 years. She practices law in Northern Virginia with the Alvarez Law Firm. She is also the executive advisor of International Knowledge Exchange. She is the host of the podcast, Let's Be Honest. Her handle is just Jonda. That's how I met her. on these internet YouTube streets. And she's an author too. Welcome back to the show, Jonda.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, guys, let's get going. Let's get it going. Oh, already in the chat, somebody said, "Oh, look, let's see, what is this?" Hi, Pam. I wish I had been available for this show. Well, you can chime in, Marsha. I can
Absolutely.
whatever. Good evening, everyone. Hey, Renee. A happy birthday, Attorney Scott. Oh, that's sweet. That is sweet. Okay. Okay. So let's get into it, guys. Michael, since you're our only teacher on the panel, give me your thoughts on what is going on in Florida's education department. I mean, what the Florida? What are you thinking when you heard this?
Well, I definitely follow what's going on in Florida, and they lead the way in several ways, as you mentioned in your email with the GOP legislatures. I was not that surprised because honestly, I have family all over Florida,
Uh-oh.
and I had an aunt who was a teacher in Florida, and so she told me horror stories about elementary kids getting arrested, and it's not a place where I ever really want to go live. North Carolina is bad enough.
Oh,
So when I saw that, I was not surprised. I mean, you think about Trayvon Martin and all that stuff that happens in Florida. It's just, to me, it's been consistent with the thoughts down there for many generations. The way it impacts us is sometimes the North Carolina General Assembly, which now has the GOP has a super majority,
yeah.
and they have been pushing uh, anti-critical race theory policies um, at us as well. And so when I heard, I wasn't surprised. We have been fighting the fight up here in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the North Carolina House passed House Bill 187, which they tried to pass 2 years ago, and they
Mm-hmm.
passed it this year, which basically says, we had to teach history with traditional and our leaders like the founders of our country, the founding fathers.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't really say anything negative about them. They were the heroes. They were all right, and if you question them, um, then you can get in trouble. Now it hadn't passed the Senate yet, but I believe once it does, it's going to be a law because the governor can't stop the legislature from overriding his veto at this point.
Right, right.
So
Right. Absolutely. Because we had one turncoat in the state legislature here in North Carolina that just messed up everything,
yes.
just totally disenfranchised our Democratic people. So, Shauna, the same question to you from your lens as a new grandparent. What were your thoughts of hearing about what this whitewashing of history?
My first thought was, what is he afraid of? Because was there a problem with the history that they were already whitewashing? And I'm just going to say that because it is missing a lot. And our children, and not just our children, but a lot of us adults are missing a whole lot of
Mhm.
contributions and things and that contributed to this society as a whole, because we're out here, we're seeing all these negative images of Black people. But
Mhm.
now you want to take away the few things that they have added. And what is the reason? What makes you, was there some study that was done that says white children are being made to feel less than, or what was the reason with all the other things that he stated that is an issue, such as crime laden cities, economic malaise, military recruitment crisis? What made you make this such a priority? you
Mhm.
know what are you afraid of here? You wanted to do something that was, in my opinion, maybe a part of a different agenda.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And John, to the same question, but with a little twist, is there any possible legal recourse that this new education standard that we can do about it? Can the Florida Education Association possibly sue? Tell us what you thought about when you heard about it, because I know you were mad about it. So mad that you changed your birthday plans to be on the show.
I
So
sure did.
so tell us what you think.
Well, my initial reaction was, well, yeah, it's Florida. I mean, I'm just I'm just gonna be honest. So that's the throwaway reaction where it's just like, yeah, it's Florida. That would be no different than I live in the DC metro area with somebody telling me that traffic was horrible today, and I'd be like, okay, yes, you were on 95 North, right outside of DC. So that's my first reaction, and then the more visceral one, as a parent, as an educator, and a lover of education and learning. Because I think that is so important for all of us. I can't imagine that all of us on here aren't we don't love lifetime learning. um I think that it to touch on something that Shauna said, you mentioned fear. What are they afraid of? And I would posit, especially, the political, putting my political hat on, that the issue isn't whether or not the lawmakers are afraid. It is using the very successful politics of fear to further other causes. And what mobilizes people faster than, especially women,
Mhm.
and we are usually the drivers of those non-tangibles, like the philosophy of our household, the learning of our children, and even getting folks out to vote. That's not something that's just a Black women thing. When white women mobilize, that's a huge deal too.
Mhm.
So it is to use the politics of fear among their most precious commodity, which is the same as ours,
Mhm.
which is the children. We have seen it successfully, that politics of fear used successfully by former President Trump.
Mhm.
And even here in Virginia, and
Mhm.
I suspect in North Carolina, based on what Michael was saying, they use things like critical race theory
Mhm.
to drive home this notion that little Johnny is going to be made to feel bad. Little Amber is going to have her feelings hurt because she's going to go to school and be told that white people are bad, which critical race theory doesn't say, right? But it's not like they're going to go and read the book. Um,
Mhm.
they're going to be told that it's a possibility that your grandfather or great grandfather may have owned slaves. And the reality of it is that it is a possibility,
Right.
especially depending on where you live, just like it's a possibility that, given that my family's roots are in South Carolina, my great grandfather or his father was probably a slave or a sharecropper. Given the nature of history in the United States, these things are very possible. But again, it's the politics of fear, because we know as educated people that CRT is not even an elementary, middle school, or high school level course.
Mm-mm.
It is not. It is something that, if an institution even chooses to have it as a part of their curriculum, it is a college level curriculum. But effectively used in the next level post Trump, that's not to say he's gone away, but again, post first wave Trump, uh,
Mhm.
to use to push an agenda, and the agenda is not about racism the way that we think about it. The
Mhm.
agenda is using racism to get out the vote, to
Mhm.
get their supporters to vote the way that they need them to. And most importantly, to get out the supporters that traditionally do not come out. Like Trump got the people out of the hills and the valleys and stuff, folks that don't normally go out to vote. Why?
Right.
Because you scared them into thinking that Muslims or Blacks or any of us would disrupt their way of life when they live somewhere where they'd never even see us.
And they're not
So,
picking that. They're not picking the fruit, the cotton, or nothing. They're not
None of
doing those jobs. And they, in fact, there was just a really bizarre article that they were saying that the borders are hauntingly quiet.
Yep.
And see, to Satan, them pass them laws where if you're caught with this person and they're not this, that, or the third, and all of those people are picking the fruit and all that stuff. So we're gonna be paying $5-10 for a grapefruit after a while, or orange, because we don't do that work. Americans aren't doing that work. So
Absolutely.
it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Marcia wrote this beautiful statement here. If you are not seen as being human, there are some that will treat you inhumanely. This is where these revamping and changing our history. We should not be seen as intellectuals who greatly contributed to this country's stature. I too sing America. I have to tell you that Marcia is a long-term educator. Yeah.
I love it. And I just wanted to, if you don't mind, touch on what you said about legal recourse.
Yes. Yes.
Legal recourse, this didn't happen in a courtroom, right? This is something that happened outside of those realms. In fact, it didn't even happen in the halls of the Florida State House. This is something that we know was initiated by individuals with those aspirations and people who are there, but they did it very I hate to say it, but when someone's strategy is a good one, it just is, even if the result is a bad one. It was a good strategic move because they did it through the agency that is actually charged with helping to set these standards in place. The
Right.
legal recourse, in my opinion, is twofold. One, it would need to come from the parents. I don't think that it would necessarily be enough for teachers to try to sue, because quite frankly, from the standpoint of teachers, it would be no different than any other issue that teachers disagree on, like the new math versus the old math. Teachers have philosophical disagreements about those types of things all the time. So if there was a cause of action, and of course it would need to be a creative one that you sit down with a good lawyer to craft, I think that it would need to come from a parent class on behalf of their children, because I do think it would need to be an entire class to make an impact. The other piece, which is still legal but not necessarily in a courtroom per se, would be the legislative route. Because ultimately, these individuals, some of them, is certainly your head of your board of education, is probably a political appointee. So there is very much politics in play here. But there certainly could be some executive orders or laws or things that went through the political channels to deal with the idea that we, as the state of Florida, the lawmakers of Florida, will not allow decisions for education to be based this way. That they would probably make arguments very much like the class under something like perhaps equal protection grounds, those types of things. So I think that so those would be the avenues that I would look for, but most importantly, pressure. Pressure. And I'm not talking about just marches and all of that. I'm talking about actual moves, finding out from our people on the ground there in Florida, what do you need from us to support whatever it is that you are going to do? How many lawyers do you need coming down there helping you put together a class?
Let me interject something, John. The one thing that we didn't do, they put out that crazy little what was it? A travel ban instead of a economic ban. Nobody understands things more than when you start messing with the money. You got to fool with the money. They learned that way back when they were in Montgomery, when they did the bus boycott and all the black people started carpooling and walking to work. Okay.
My hometown.
You understand money. You can't talk about, oh, let's do. And I criticize that heavily about the travel ban. But let's move forward. So because I got a burning question for Shauna. Shauna, you being an IT person, and with the growing use of artificial intelligence, I'm really concerned about the misinformation factor in history. The misinformation factor in that they are whitewashing history. And it's coded. It'll be coded that way. So I'm just thinking. So then what? What do we?
So then what? It's this is the beginning, and this is where we have to start putting in legislature. This is where we have to start the movement to make sure that that cannot happen, because certainly AI. I think you and I talked about the black and white stages where there was just pen and pencil. We can always go back and reference those. But if there is any holes in that, and anything that's present and future can also be lost. Completely changed.
Right.
I mean, absolutely completely changed. You would be, I would say you would be, but I know you're very knowledgeable on that topic. People would be amazed at how much can be changed by AI. So the question itself, yes, there can be some misinformation that has been changed, not as much as going forward. I think now is the time for us to start making those moves. I think that's one good thing that's one page we can take from the other side of the party, because a lot of the GOP, they start years before with their agendas, and they baby step until this point to where we are now, where we're altering what our children are hearing in history about history. So we have to start early. This is the infancy stages of this, and it's time for us to start putting legislature in place so that we do not end up here in the next 5 to 10 years saying, wow, was there slavery?
Right.
And it was a blast. It was, hey, we,
exactly.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right. Because if we're not careful, those people who we already know that most of the people doing all of the copying, they don't look like us. That's why there was a whole legal ramifications behind photo identity and facial identity and things like that, because it was coded for Caucasian people and not necessarily for Black people with flat noses and things like that. AI gets us all down another rabbit hole. But I was sharing with you guys that I had done a presentation panel on AI, the first one that NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, had last year in Vegas, and I'm doing a follow-up this year in Birmingham, Alabama. And it is just amazing what has happened since a year ago, when we were just kind of like, what is AI, and doing like the basic premises of it. And then this year we'll get into virtual reality and some other things. So it's just really, all of these things factor, you guys, into this discussion about history and how things are being taught to our children.
Which is one reason why I wanted to start a nonprofit teaching cybersecurity, not IT, not just IT, but cybersecurity. So you could get into different areas of IT and be able to understand what's happening. I wanted to teach that to the homeless because as a military person and working for the government, I would go into every meeting being the only black place in there. And I wanted us to be much better represented. And there is a need, not just for this purpose, but for many other purposes. We need to step up our knowledge in the IT field as a whole. But this is one of the major reasons that we need to get involved and understand what's happening. Even if we don't work in the field, we need to understand what's happening.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, Michael, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm circling back. I'm going around and around. Michael, we have in North Carolina, there are 8 state recognized Native American tribes located here in North Carolina. I read where there are 28 states that were surveyed with federally recognized tribes. Only 43% were required to teach Native American history. Does North Carolina require that Native American history be taught? Do you know?
We teach a section called Native North Carolinians
Mm-hmm.
before the arrivals of the Europeans. And I would say this: I ask my students, I say to them, these people were here long before the Europeans came. Did they call themselves Native North Carolinians?
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely challenge them to think about that, even the term, Native Americans, because these nations had their own names, their own languages, their own government.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't have called themselves early North Carolinians or Native Americans. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and just to challenge them to think in that way, which could get me in trouble, because when we
Mm-hmm.
look at manifest destiny and westward expansion, and I challenge my students, I say that is the term that we use. It's in our textbooks, it's in our lessons. But what do the natives who got ran over, who got pushed out, who got murdered, would they call it
Who were
manifest
given
destiny?
smallpox blankets.
Yeah.
Yes, like Lupe said. So it is a small part of the curriculum, but it would take teachers who have courage to actually challenge and teach beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess because my grandmama's grandson, she grew up down in Smithville, North Carolina, when they had the even when I was a young man going down to Smithville, they had in Johnson County signs saying the home of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. I
I'm
heard
not
of
talking little
that.
signs. I'm talking about big billboards. And so,
I
yeah, so she grew up in that environment, and but she didn't take any stuff.
heard.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, when they said Ian get off the street, she said your mama's an Ian, and
Oh.
so she was that woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess because I'm her favorite grandson, and everybody agrees to that, I take after her and I fight the fight. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons I even got into education is because I was a blue collar worker, raised my family and all kind. And I was blessed to go back to school. And people say, "Well, what you want to do?" And I said, "I'm gonna go into education, to teach and help the young black men and young black women."
Mm-hmm.
But I also found out that it helps everybody, including the white kids, the Hispanic kids, to learn the truth about
Mm-hmm.
American history and not get that whitewashed history that we keep talking about. I mean, if you learn about Thomas Jefferson, he was this great person, but also he had children by one of his slaves. I mean, these are things that happen, and our great forefathers, George Washington was a slave owner. All these things that we've been told that these laws, which are trying to make it so we can't teach those kind of things, or even
Mm-hmm.
get our kids to think about it, where they can actually learn about history, is something that I appreciate y'all saying that we got to have it's a movement, and we definitely got to get legislation in there. Yes, we do have to learn from those Republicans who don't hate the player, hate the game.
Absolutely.
Um,
If nothing else, their strategy is sound
Mm-hmm.
historically over and over again. This is not new stuff, just new players, new strategy, and adapting to shifts and changes
Mhm.
in technology, the population, the fact that people can move around a lot more than they used to. Those types of things require in any situation. That's just life, right? We all need to shift and move. So when it comes to Republicans or really any good political strategist, they shift and move with the times, but sound strategy, good strategy is just that. And if Republicans don't consistently show up, every other party, all of them, not just Democrats, everybody consistently is in one area. Doesn't matter whether it's the Tea Party, the right, the far right, the moderates, is unification. They will hate each other with a capital H.
Mhm.
Trump calling Cruz's wife ugly on a national scale.
Yes, he
Called
did.
his father a criminal. But
Yep.
when it came time for them to take a word from Beyonce to get information,
Mhm.
they got information behind
And
their
they
candidate.
don't talk down about each other, and they don't do all of that. If they gonna
I mean,
talk
they will when they're running against each other, but when it is time to get information,
exactly, but Jonda, for the most part, they handled their business
oh
like
yeah,
grandmama told you how to handle
on the
your
back porch.
on the back porch, and you don't say our business out loud to the
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Say
Right?
it for the
You know
people
what?
in the back room. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, back porch and front porch. Oh Lord.
But
Right.
but we get we will destroy each other,
Yeah.
and like how they did
Mhm.
Kamala Harris. I mean,
Who,
really?
by the way, has been down there speaking
Yes, she
constantly about this thing.
has.
Kamala Harris
Yes,
has been
did
boots
it.
on the ground in Florida
Yes,
all week.
she
Talk
has.
about her if you want to.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, she has. But not enough people have saluted her or not talking her up. I mean, she's the first ever in that position, female, black, whatever, ever. And then for them to say, well, what is she doing? What, did you ask that about the other VPs? What were they doing? They don't get to be on the TV 24/7. They're not the first person, right? They are in second place.
And it's basic
Mhm.
organizational management. I don't
Yeah.
care if it is your local PTA
Right.
versus the president versus of the United States. Your VP serves at the pleasure of the president.
Yeah.
And
And
some
that's where
presidents,
we dropped the ball. That's where we dropped the ball. And
yeah.
so my question is, what do we do? What do we do? And I would like to ask this of the panel if I can ask the question. Um,
The conversation.
what, although we are having this forum, and I thank Pamela for allowing this, but going forward and from your experience, what do we do outside of um, having social media presence? What can we do to drum up more support for this action? Because I see you have people like you, Pamela, who have, you're on fire, and you're out here and you're making moves, but not the rest of us. The rest of us we're giving lip service. We're just talking bad about it, but we're not doing anything. So
My
I would like to ask, outside of that. Now I know, John, that you did touch on. I think you said something. It was something about writing in. I can't remember that, but maybe you can go back and fill that space for me. But what can we do if enough of us do not get behind each other? I mean, what is our next step other than having, the few people that are on fire just
we
do
have
And
that,
let's
and the
face
rest
it,
of us
those who are
destroy?
on fire are preaching to the choir.
we
Right. The choir. Yeah.
but what the goal is, the only reason why I started this show was that I'm in communications, and all I could think of what was something that I could do to help contribute in some way. And I knew that if I could gather people together, and not necessarily well-known people that other folks will identify like it's a peer type of conversation, and that people can participate, they can share the information and disseminate it out. That's what, if everybody did their little bits, we don't all have to do a lot of lifting. We just have to do a little bit, and our influence is immeasurable. That's the beauty of social media. That's the very positive side. And so, and I also understand that nobody stays glued to the news like I do. Okay, I'm a news junkie. I'm in journalism and all this stuff, so that's what I do, and I like it. So if you can do something where you break it down, like we're breaking down some things and people are hearing stuff maybe for the first time from different perspectives. All of you guys are from different areas of the country or different states. We do have some influence. We really do. But everybody, if you just do a phone bank, if Michael is in his classroom and trying to make his kids think out of the box beyond what it says in the classroom literature that they have ordained for him to teach, just beyond that. And did you know, because a teacher has so much power and influence in a classroom. I mean, teachers are powerful. And it's so much so that they're saying that the teaching crisis that we have in America, we have 5,000 fewer teachers than we need in North Carolina. And all across the country, it is a great disparity in education because people they don't want to pay you. And then we got these kids that are just, what is it with the guns and stuff? That's a whole nother topic, but that's part of it. But Shauna, if we all do our little bit, you're doing your little bit, Michael's doing his little bit, I'm doing my little bit, Jonna's doing her little bit, and the people in the chat are doing their little bits. All the little bits add up to something to get movement, to get people ultimately to vote righteously in their best interest so that we can turn some of this crap around. That's
I would take it a step further as well. And I'm going to give you 3 words that for those on the panel, as well as those who are listening, if nothing else, if you take these 3 things from me and keep applying them, they will carry you through in any issue that we come up on. Those 3 words, and I'm going to break them down in a moment: educate, activate, and legislate. Those are the 3 things that we need to do. Starting with educate. Most of the things that we find out, like even with the situation in Florida, most of those things are based on sound bites, right? We find out about the main one that made the cover of all the newspapers about the fact that they talk about the benefits of slavery, right? And the fact that you learn useful skills and all of those things, which is ridiculous. And even with that, quick side note, because I'm just snarky by nature, the benefit that I got, let's say I would say that my grandmother, or in this case, great grandmother, got a benefit in that she learned a useful skill. She didn't get to use it for her own benefit. When she learned the skill of picking cotton, the skill ended up being used for your cotton gin, bruh. What are you talking about?
You didn't even get credit for creating half of those inventions.
Exactly. So the skills that my forebears allegedly learned didn't serve them anyway. They were still in service for you. Okay, but that just gets me fired up. But the reason why I bring that up is just in terms of that and that umbrella with educate. That one soundbite is the one that we all took away and ran with it. And that's a serious one. But in terms of educating ourselves, that's not the only one. That's just one on the high school level. Or no, I think that one's on the middle school level. On the high school level, they are required to teach basically what I would call tit for tat. If they teach about the uprising that happened in Florida, and we know there's been several, but let's say one in particular, like the one that was the subject of the movie Rosewood, because that's a lot of us who are African American, that's a reference most of us know. They also must teach instances where African Americans were the violent ones. Now, what does that really say? Now, what they're trying to say is that just teaches that everybody has their good and bad points. No, it doesn't. Most of us
I mentioned 1898.
Exactly. Most of us know that what that is really teaching, subtly, but teaching nonetheless, is that the behaviors against African Americans, Native Americans, Jews, anybody who is different, the Japanese, all of them, that those things were justified because our behavior was bad. And because we're bad people, it's okay for bad things to be done with us. On
No.
the elementary level, they are only required to teach basic recognition. I call this the line, just the drawing the line thing. Remember when we were in school and you would have it's like a memory game. You'd have a picture of Harriet Tubman on and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks on one side of the page, then the names on the other side of the page, and you had to draw a line between the two
Yeah.
Yeah.
that match the name with the face.
Yeah.
Well, that is the base level, the only level they are required to teach, which is recognition.
That is
They
sad.
are not required to teach what those individuals are recognized for. They can, but are not required to do so. And of course, as we know, because of the Stop Woke Act, because let's remember, all of these things go in tandem.
Yes.
Because let's say a teacher were to say, I'm not just going to have the kids draw lines between Barack Obama, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Harriet Tubman, but not tell them what they do. Well, remember, because of the Stop Woke Act, if a teacher were to start to give the rest of the explanation, and a student goes home and tells their parent that that made them feel less than or bad, that under the umbrella of the Stop Woke Act, that
Mhm.
can be stopped.
Yeah.
So these are examples where we need it, even if we're talking about just Florida. And of course, we know it is not just Florida, that we have to make sure that we are fully educated on what is going on, not just in Florida, but in North Carolina and all of these. There are laws and I'm sorry, not laws, but I don't know what we call them, right? Standards, change of standards, lack of standards, uh, of these things in states all over the country.
Mhm.
Florida gets a lot of attention because Florida is proud of being loud and wrong,
It,
but
yeah.
they're not the only ones. So when we educate and we know the issues and they're coming from all of the directions, then we are ready to activate, because then we come together as in that, remember we talked about the Republicans being in formation. We
Yeah.
are able to come together and support and help the individuals who are willing to step up, whether it's lawyers, individuals who are willing to run for office and those types of things,
Mhm.
to have them positioned to fight on the legal front when I talked earlier about the class actions, or on the legislative front, because in order to make the laws and change the laws, you have to be the law, which
Right.
means you need to be in the building. And then
Okay.
finally,
Let me cut you so that we can get some of these chats in here. Okay, Alicia Baker Rogers says, I understand what Shauna is saying. So somebody's feeling you, Shauna. I've been wondering, where is the national clamor from the African American and other minorities? Don't you think it's time to organize a march on Washington? Here's the thing: who's going to organize it? Because do we have who can you identify readily who is a central person in our culture that people would a majority of people would rally around to follow? Because
Cornel
usually,
West,
who who did you say?
Cornel West,
Uh,
Cornel West.
but
oh,
see, this is part of the problem. Black folks run around waiting for the next coming of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, looking for somebody to fill the leadership vacuum. There
But
are
it's the same thing with like if white policeman shoots a black person who's unarmed, we will march. We have organized marches everywhere, and that gets action.
but
And
when the
I
march
think
is
much
over,
in the
then what?
same way, we can organize the same type of movements for these types of actions. When they changed the abortion bill,
yeah.
um, that was something that people came out in droves for.
Hmm.
We can do this as a community. And it's not just black people. It's not just Democrats that need to be a part of this. Republicans and whites and other races know this is wrong. You know this is wrong, and you need to get behind what is right and correct. Just like what John just said, the things that are missing. I didn't even know that a Black person created, fiber optic cable, or, the traffic light, or, the drying machine. There's so many things that I still just don't even know at my age of X. So it's we have to organize ourselves the same way we do when we have a shooting that is unjust. It has to be that important, but it's not. I'm just gonna say it. I don't see it out there. I don't see it where us as a community is fired up, because we're not seeing the whole picture. I think it's just happening, and if you're not watching the news, you probably don't even know that this change is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So
the cycle is so rapid. What were you going to say, Michael?
I agree with Jean that legislate, and I think that ties into everybody doing their part. I mean, because after the marching is done, we need people in office to change some of the laws and to speak up. And as Rohima said in her comment, we can't just all keep following lockstep with the Democrats. But that's we need that. We need someone to go in there and after the marching, after the protesting, and to follow through. So I mean, it was an FBI profile. If I'm mistaken, I will apologize. But that Black people get upset, they'll come out there and march, but then after a while, the fur would die down and things would go on as they always have been. And so that's why we need people to do their part, as been said here, and continue to follow that. That's why I'm still following that House Bill 187 that passed through the House, and I'm keeping track of it where it goes in the Senate. So
how do we get Cornel West? How do we get those people how do we get them to stand up and say, at this point, and I'm not talking about every issue, just this particular issue. How do we get someone to, at this point right now, to, say, hey, I volunteer for this? That's
at this point, he is standing up, and I'm standing up too, because that's why I decided I'm running for office. I'm sorry.
Are much closer than you think. Your heroes are not who we need to, not on television. They are not necessarily, I mean, in no shade to Al Sharpton, Cornel West, or any of those. If they come, that's going to bring television. No, I'm saying but that's not a bad thing. We know how the world works, right? Yeah. If they come, that brings much needed attention from television cameras and all of that. So, and given the age that we live in, the impact of media, any type of media, especially television and of course the internet, the impact of visual media is important. And of course, given that we're in 2023 and because of the internet being as it is now, that impact of the media is immediate. It's not like when I was growing up where the news cameras would be out there, but unless it was like something huge like the Challenger exploding, you still had to wait until 6 p.m. or 11 p.m. when the news came on, right? Okay, so we're all kind of in the same generation with that. Whereas now it is immediate. In fact, it's so immediate that somebody might have you live and you don't even know it. So there is a level of importance to that. And so I don't want to ever downplay that having big name figures is not important. But as far as doing the work and making things happen, your heroes, your individuals who are going to get that work done are closer than we think. And why are they closer? And then before I even say who it is, you're going to know who it is. It is because we are in a war for the hearts and most importantly, the minds of our children currently, as well as our future generations of children. Now, internally, as African Americans, certainly we've got some internal culture wars going on. It's on several different levels, but those things can be dealt with a couple of reasonably intelligent people just, quieting down the simple. Okay, because if it's salacious and loud, people are going to listen, but once they sit back, we all know stupid when we hear it. But ultimately, I mean, we hope, right? But ultimately,
Yeah,
when it
not
comes
really.
to something like education, as much as I think this word has been viewed very much as a negative, it's not always a negative. Education is part of your indoctrination in terms of society, citizenship, and your overall knowledge as to who you are and what the expectations are of who you will be. Not to mention knowing your history so that you are not doomed to repeat it. So
At the rate that they're going to whitewashing it, and if we don't preserve it in the books and all of that kind of stuff, like Shauna's saying, listen,
so
we'll be doomed to repeat it if we don't teach them the right thing, if they don't learn it correctly. I have something I want
by the
to,
way, your heroes are your mothers.
yeah,
You
yeah,
get black mamas. That's who you need. You get your sororities filled with black mamas. You get Jack and Jill, which I'm a proud member of. It is a black mothers organization.
yeah.
You get educators who in our community tend to historically fill the hallways of schools, women, and of course in our areas, black women. So these women are not, they are, our mothers are our first educators as well as our actual educators in schools. Those are the individuals that you
Well,
mobilize for the front lines.
I agree with you, but you know what? We cannot deny Michael Dublin here, who is a
I mean,
black educator.
I get it from that TV show Dinosaur. The little baby said, "Not the mama." It's like you know, I'm there. I'm on the front lines. I raised my kids. I got my grandkids here. They're in school. So
Oh no, and that's not to discount anybody who wants to be out there. But we're talking. But you all asked if we're identifying leadership. If you're identifying leadership, you usually do that, especially if it's a ground root, not ground, especially if it is a grassroots campaign. A
yes,
grassroots campaign typically comes from the people in that community the people in that community uh who need to be pushed forward, and that's the educators and
Yeah.
the mothers.
Listen, I've got this thing that I want to bring up to you guys, and I want Michael, I want you to first chime in on this. I heard a theory from a political pundit, and I thought it was so interesting. Um, I can't even remember if it was a male or female who said it, that the reason why DeSantis and others want to change the history narrative about Black folks um, was because oh shoot, where's my notes? Sorry. Hold on.
take your time. Take
Oh,
your time.
when they saw, here it is, when they saw so many millennials and Gen Z out protesting, they were Caucasian, protesting on behalf of Black Lives Matter the summer of 2020. And his theory is that it scared them. And by whitewashing the history, their kids can see that America's not so bad. See, kids, it's not so bad. Don't feel bad about what you've been hearing because it's not so bad. And nothing, and then it says the Confederacy was all about freedom and nothing was wrong with the Southern way. What do you think about that, Michael?
I think that's very valid. I mean,
I,
when Public Enemy put out "Fear of a Black Planet" in 1990. I mean, right? Public Enemy. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's it's been there for decades. And so when they see that, you know, their youth are like you said, locking arms
mm-hmm,
um, with other youth and Black Lives Matter protests, yeah, it scared the crap out of them.
mm-hmm,
And so that's yes, I definitely think that's a very valid point, and I would have said the same thing
mm-hmm.
because it is fear that's driving them. But guys, fear is a weak emotion.
Mhm.
And they can feel their
Mhm.
grasp on all of this slipping. And
Mhm.
so I look at this as like a last minute gasp, and they're trying to change everything and squeeze out the truth and choke it out.
Mhm.
But you can't choke out the truth.
Mhm.
It will prevail, and the truth will set them free. And so at some point, yeah, the youth already see it, and
Mhm.
they're saying, yes, they're rejecting that whitewashing of history. Not just
Mhm.
the black kids, the white kids, they're rejecting that. I see
Mhm.
it in the classroom. They ask me questions that they can't ask their grandparents, and
Mhm.
I'm bold enough to tell them, yeah, we're in Garner, and good chances your family's been here since the early 1800s. There's a good chance your family might have owned slaves.
Mhm.
Um, and but it's the truth, and it's going to set them free. So I definitely think that is a valid argument.
Mhm. What do you think about it, Shauna?
I, you know, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I get too wired up.
We need you wired up. We need everybody wired up. We got to fight this
That's
thing.
all wired up. We need
We
a
got to go.
fire.
We got to go.
Uh-huh.
this is this,
Mike, we told you
this
to
is
fight
not.
the power.
Yeah, we got to go. What the ghetto boy said, black folks always singing. They need to be swinging.
This is just like you talked about, the Black Lives Matter did shake things up, and it caused a lot of fear because it reached not just Americans as a whole. It's
Yeah, the
reached,
world.
the world, and
Mhm.
that might be scary. But I think at this point we need to make sure that we're not excluding a group of people. I mean, we don't need to exclude white folks. We don't need to
Definitely not.
exclude Republicans, because there are Republicans and white people that do not think like DeSantis.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or they don't think like that.
Right.
And they are just Republicans who have a right to what they believe. And that's cool. But they know when wrong is wrong. It's just like with Black Lives Matter. They joined in with us. They help make things change.
Mhm.
We have to involve everyone. And at this point, being a veteran, I'm just going to say it. The United States of America needs to join together as a whole at this point, because we are not our enemies. Let's just say that if you watch the news every day, you would know that we need to focus on our adversaries even more than ever. And it's this type of thing that keeps us all, scattered about, and we're not looking to, what's really happening and how they are inching forward to take our throne. So anyway, I'm just leaving it at that.
Well, well, Shauna, let me ask you about that, because with the CIA, no, it was the FBI, had put out a while ago that the most dangerous threat that was to our way of life was this white nationalism. This
Yes, at that point.
so the boogeyman, and I agree with you. We got the boogeyman is Russia, and then you had the boogeyman is China and all of this stuff. But it's like China holds so much of our debt. I mean, we're married together, so I mean, I don't know what I mean, you know what I'm saying? You can't. I mean,
There's stuff I can't say. I just think that within the last 5 years or so, we
uh,
have become so separated as a nation. It's
yeah,
like we
we have.
and we're separated by political parties.
But
It's not even black and white anymore. It's liberal and conservative world. And just because I think people need to understand that, like, we do not have to exclude everyone else that thinks sensibly, that have expand our reach to not just us, because as you can see, we are not where we need to be on this topic. So we might need some of our white brothers and Republican brothers to join in and say, hey, you guys know this is not right. Those of you who think the same way of knowing that right is right and wrong is wrong, join in with us in this, because we need your support. We think the same on at least that level. Just like, he said, I mean, some of his students know it's wrong, no matter what their color is. So, I mean, I think we have to expand our reach and not just think within our realm. Think outside of our communities.
I agree. The thing is, Oshana, when I first was able to vote, we had a Republican governor run. I'm from the great state of Michigan, and we had a Republican governor named Governor Milliken. He was wonderful. Everybody liked Governor Milliken, and he was a great governor. He was a Republican, but he was what I call the normal Republican. They had differences on mostly fiscal policy. And, it used to be a time where people could have a come to Jesus meeting at the bar or have a drink or a beer with one another back in Congress or whatever, and people would come together. And now it is so, you're right, it is so horrifically polarized. And, I know Russian bots had a whole lot to do with stuff that went down in the 2016 election. What have you? And I really do think that our Trump had monies connected with the oligarchs and stuff, and that was part of that whole mess. My 2 cents of what I just from all of my reading. Alicia Baker Rogers is giving you your flowers because she's a fellow veteran too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Judy, let's see. Got a lot of. I appreciate you guys in the chat. Make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button and liking the video and sharing the video. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. Help me. It's free. We need to start homeschool networks to teach our children the truth. Well, there are homeschool networks. There are perhaps in after-school programs. We cannot depend on the public school system fully educate our children. You can't. And see, the thing is, oh gosh, our family. I tell you, one of the problems that we have with the schools even being able to be effective is that if our families aren't together, see, because let's just face it, if you've got your families raggedy and not together, it is very hard for a child to show up together, wanting to learn and listen, and everything is a wreck at home, so it's so complicated now. It really is.
No, that's an important part. It really truly is. We certainly need to step up our family bond here, on our side of the road. Literally, that is major. And if you look at the numbers, you see, and they start teaching their children about this stuff way younger than we do. Or do we even, broach the topic? I know some of us do, but I don't know a whole lot of folks that do that at home.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do it with my grandson, but I mean, when I was a young mom, I didn't, I thought the school, had it down pat,
I also think one of the things that we have to remember, especially in when we start talking about political parties, is especially like with the Republicans, like for instance, when this came up earlier, I don't think any of us, especially because again, when we have these discussions, we're usually preaching to the choir. We all kind of get it when we appear on panels like this, but I don't think that those of us who, like you all, are out here doing the work have a lack of understanding that there are people of every race, every political party, sexual orientation, whatever, culture, who feel the same way about certain causes. No different than if it was a reproductive rights issue, then you certainly have women across every spectrum that may feel strongly in a certain way about that. I think the issue is not so much about whether or not every Republican is bad or every this one Democrat is good or whatever. I think the issue is more so what we talked about earlier, is that it just so happens that these particular individuals in the case of the past 5 or 6 years, Trump, who of course, because he was president, became the poster boy for his party, like any president does, used the race and division as it's an actual strategy to win, and in doing so, it left a lasting impact that went beyond the campaign trail and election day, and literally divided the party in a manner that didn't end after people left the poll box. Essentially walked, so it would be like they walked into a building, blew all the rooms up, and didn't bother coming back to sweep the debris, leave a little money for the maintenance plant crew or anything like that. They just left us in shambles and walked away. And what made that worse is we all fell for it. And I don't mean fell for it as in all of us became extra racist or extra whatever. I mean, we fell for it in the sense that we allowed that division to stay, that we didn't just leave it on election day when we knew for a fact, unequivocal fact, that it was a strategy. We still left it in place. And so that I think is part of the issue, because right thinking people who want to raise their kids in a safe environment, nobody wants. I don't think that anybody of any race, any culture, any political party wants to be afraid that their kids aren't going to come home at the hands of a rogue police officer or just a thug or a crazy person or whoever. And I think we all feel the same way. Again, people who are reasonable, we all want to have the same equal rights when we go in the criminal justice system and those types of things. And that's why it comes down to strategy. I think, Shauna, you mentioned earlier the reproductive rights case, that went through the Supreme Court. Again, talk about strategy. Or well, you know what? Let's go with one more recent and easier to explain the strategy. The situation with the affirmative action cases that just passed a couple of weeks ago. The strategy, brilliant, nothing disgusting, absolutely gutter.
Well, they're
brilliant at the same time.
Yeah.
I literally turned on the news and was like, what happened?
Yeah.
It was
brilliant. Executed beautifully. The same thing with reproductive rights. They have been, the individuals involved in this stuff has been bringing case after case. Talk about playing the long game. They have been trying to overturn Roe v. Wade since it was passed. Bringing case after case, year after year, hoping that one day they would get just the right case that hit on just the right set of facts with the right court. Yes, but the stars still had to align with just the right fact pattern too. That is strategy. That is tenacity. That is staying the course. That is not just getting upset about affirmative action 2 weeks ago and forgetting about it, and and everybody going down the rabbit hole for the past 10 days. I've seen people more concerned about a young lady who told a story, a lie about going missing and was back in 2 days flat. Folks still haven't let that go, but affirmative action that affects your whole life, because it's not just about education,
right,
and your children's lives and all of that. Oh, after about 2 weeks, I don't even think it was 2 weeks, a good week and a half. Who's talking about that? Pamela was. Or you've been talking about it.
Yeah.
But
I have to, but
the news cycle happens so fast. Listen, guys, we're out of time. I have enjoyed you all so much. I appreciate you. Thank you to all of you in the chat for being super active. Please share this video. Please, please, please share the video. If you're on YouTube, and even if you're not on YouTube, please like the video on YouTube. Share the video, subscribe to me on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. I really do. I really do. It's a free way to support my channel. It's the only way to get the algorithms up so that it can disseminate itself on YouTube. I'm not as heavily on YouTube as I am on Facebook and LinkedIn. So the social media is a beast. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. And someday, very soon, these audios will be put on traditional uh, uh, podcasts like Spotify and Apple and all of that good stuff. So, anyways, thank you guys. Let's wave everybody out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Happy birthday,
Bye-bye.
John.
Bye bye.